I've previously drilled up through the rear mounts with the 10.5mm drill bit. I've also used a 13mm drill bit to drill through this outer skin to get a clearance hole for the M12. And then finally I ran the supplied threading tap up through the hole through the mount. Now placed the VinceBar on top of its position, its final position, and used 2 bolts. These are from these are actually the rear bolts. I just took them from the underside and used them on the top just to get an approximate position of the VinceBar. And as you can probably make out here, I used a felt pen and just scribed a little bit, because we need to make an opening here in order for the VinceBar, this sort of lip here, to sink in underneath. Behind, we also need to remove this this stud here. This is, I think, this is probably only for the touring.
The BM54 radio module, or the I think it's for the TV module.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think you have them on the sedan and the coupes. So we're going to be opening up here and removing that, so we can sort of place this down on top of the floor panel, and then we're going to scribe to know where to cut and open it up. So the work continues. Pat has covered the car perfectly. We are just about to start cutting for the rear bar. Done some scribing to open up and make sure the VinceBar can sit correctly to do the scribing for the final cutting. So we used an angle grinder for most of this, so these parts here, and then just under this bracket kind of thing, we use the Dremel. It eats Dremel discs, so be careful with that. So what you also need to be careful with is not to cut too deep to get into this, what I call the shelf in here. This is where we're going to be putting the VinceBar later on. So this, again, we're doing just in order to sort of sink the VinceBar in low enough to do the correct scribing. Having placed the VinceBar again, it's obvious that it was unnecessary to cut this as much as we did to sink this down in. It's really only over here that it sort of interferes. But anyway, we put it in, have done the scribing here. I'm running that like really close, and doing a little, maybe it's a little bit too tight, but we'll just kind of grind that off as we go. We want as tight fit as we can get it. It had actually been a better idea not to go so far here to get a nicer corner later on, but we'll see if we can fix that. We've now cut the major part of the large opening, and there's some trimming left to do. I want to point out a couple of things. First of all, this cut here along the chassis leg, that's kind of difficult to do. This is dangerous. I'm not saying I recommend it, but we used a large disc on a small grinder to get it down, and sort of along the chassis leg. You can see the marks there. This needs to go a little bit further down to that line there, because this is going to be sunk down into the cavity here. The next thing is to get this level here, this edge at the same level as the shelf. I call it the shelf. I created this little tool. You can make this out of wood if you want as well. The idea is just to get this surface here onto the shelf, and then use that, it's a nail, just to scribe the line. So now we can cut this and know it's going to be in the correct height. So it's under the bar, but still not too low down, so we have some coverage here. This is going to be glued and riveted to this, so you don't want to cut too much off. So now we've cut open the bar opening. We've widened these slots here. They need to be wide enough up here, back here, and up there to allow this end plate to slide in. Also been trimming a little bit, trimming this back, test fitting the bar, and now I have the patch plate. It's on top of the upside down T. You can probably just make out that black dot there. That's for drilling stop holes. I'll show you that in the next video, but this is just test fitting them and making sure where to put that drill hole. Showing the upside down T here, punched three punches and drilled 3 holes with the 3.25mm drill bit, and we're going to be cutting slots in between those holes to flatten down the T. The T is cut. We're trying to make some wider slots in order for the T to flatten down. As you can see, you may need to, well actually you do need to bend this part up to get some access when you get, we used a Dremel here, we used an angle grinder as far as we could on that one, and then Dremel at the end and Dremel over here. Same thing on the other side there, and it's also bent up as you can see there. So towards this end here, over here, we have the support of the mount underneath. Over here, you want to be careful not to punch too hard, because otherwise it's gonna bend down. So we're gonna go easy over here. We need it to be reasonably flat, and then the MIG welds going to be ground down. We're going to remove some paint here and then glue the patch plate on top. So on the left rear, see if I can point here as well, we had a situation where we had the cracks on the underside, and obviously it's been moving up here as well, and as always the cracks form either in or around the welds here. So what we've done is we've stop drilled the cracks we found. We're now going to grind down the MIG welds and then cover this with a patch plate and epoxy. The MIG welds have been ground down using a Dremel, and we've cleaned this off with some alcohol and just wiped it off, get some grease off of it, and used the patch plates to put them on and just traced around them to know roughly where we need to remove some paint to get some grip for the epoxy. So now that the MIG welds on top of the upside down T's have been ground down, we removed the paint and we put the patch plates in place. We haven't glued them yet. I put in the VinceBar on top of it and torqued it down using wheel bolts once again, just to get this in place in the correct height using the patch plates. Have now drilled through using the 4.8mm drill bit, sorry. And on this side, I just wanted, well actually, on this side, you will notice that you go through one layer and there's a small air gap and then there's another layer. That's fine, that's correct. On this side, for whatever reason, that's not the case. However, when you get to the 2 forwardmost ones, you will notice that you go through that first layer and then you actually do hit another layer. That's actually not another layer. It's about 13mm in. You will be hitting a steel pipe in which the ventilation hoses from the gas tank go. So you cannot drill through those. That's a very bad idea, trust me. So in this case, be very careful. You go through that first layer and then you stop. Another thing I wanted to point out is that, again, this is a touring and we have this big bracket here. So as I was drilling the 3.25 millimeter here, holes here, I noticed that this one here is, you know, pretty much, you can't get to it. So I drilled on another hole, a new hole on the side there. And I also placed 9 holes equally spaced here. You drill through both the spare wheel well skin and into the you know, the lip that sits under the VinceBar. This is to connect these two pieces together so we get support for the spare wheel well, which we removed when we cut this open. And also finally these holes, these two, one there and one over there. These holes are for rivets that will be clamping this together, so we have to cut this open in order to get the end plate in there, and this rivet hole and the epoxy behind it will keep this together again and clamp that together. So this is what it looks like when we again then remove the VinceBar. You can see the rivet holes that we've drilled, and the next step is to remove paint from this surface here. That's not critical, but we need to get rid of most of the paint. Although these surfaces here, this side and that side over there, that's critical. We need that to be bare metal and surface prep, so we have that rough surface I've been talking about. And as best we can, we'll try to sort of clean the inside here as well, so the epoxy has some chance of biting there as well. Having removed the seam sealer here, I noticed let's see if that shows actually. There's a bit of an edge still there. That be very cautious to get that out. A really smooth surface here, so the end plate can attach and adhere to that surface. So we're about to enter the gluing, the epoxy and riveting segment of the installation, and I wanted to point out a couple of things. For the rough cleaning, so to say, where there is oil and grease and stuff, I use some sort of alcohol and wipes. So you really get that off. You may want to do that in a couple of steps, stages, a couple of times basically. And then same thing for, well, actually this shouldn't be all that dirty when you get it. This is the end plate of the bar. The other thing is you want to get it not only metal bare, but also like a rough surface. There's a video following this that will show how I do it in action. But basically I use a grinding disc. This one is actually a little bit, you know, edgy, tagged up, which is good. It makes it easier to get it to bounce because you sort of want small, you know, a rough surface essentially. I'm not sure I can explain that better than that. And then finally, just before you're about to, you know, you've got your epoxy stuff out, you're about to get started, use a brake cleaner. And now just spray the surface. Do not use any paper towels or anything at this point, because you don't want any of that, you know, that residue. Sorry, that's the wrong word, but you don't want any of the leftover, the paper to be sticking there. And then very importantly, make sure it's dry before you apply the epoxy. I think that's... We started the epoxy process, and these are the patch plates. So I used the applicator gun, added some epoxy to the surface, and I'm sort of mushing it out with a stubby brush, and done the same thing on the inside in the car. So added epoxy to this surface as well, and even it out so we get a really sticky surface on both surfaces. This again is sort of just to keep it all together. It's going to be sandwiched together. These slots are completely covered by the bar, and the bar is unloading these from the load. So it's I don't know, it's more or less cosmetic, but let's do the best we can. So that's the patch plates. So this goes on there.
And the holes must line up correctly then, I
And
guess?
the holes must line up correctly, of course, yeah. So that's obviously the hole for the VinceBar bolt. And this is, I'm keeping this opening in case the owner would want to add foam at some point. So we're cleaning the final cleaning with the brake cleaner on both of the end plate surfaces. Well, actually all of the surfaces, like that. This inside surface, I'm going to use a clean piece of paper and some brake cleaner. Okay, so moving on with the bar, the surfaces are cleaned. I'm starting with this surface and that surface on both the car and the bar, because they're going to be open to air a little bit longer, and then I'm going to do the most critical surfaces last, so they have the freshest epoxy. Adding the end plate surfaces. Going to add a little bit more epoxy here, but you don't need to go crazy. The excess will be pressed out anyway.
And then you use the brush on this also?
Yes.
Okay.
So get this on first. Yeah, always both surfaces, both sides. Both on the car and on the bar itself. Yeah,
yep.
So doing both side surfaces again, both on the bar and on the car. So this is actually plenty of epoxy, and I'm not doing this surface down here, this part down there. That's just air. That's the air gap. That's the air gap with what we're filling actually with the VinceBar. So no need to go there. So same thing here. Brush out the epoxy, have it really stick to the surface, and even it out. Okay, so we're placing the VinceBar. There we go. And wheel bolts. Okay, so I'm tightening these a bit and making sure that the rivets fit inside at least a couple of holes on each side. Okay, so I placed 10 of the 12 rivets in the holes, and just wanted to point out once again, they're shorter rivets for the two front right holes. So that's why there's different kind of rivets. There's actually 3 in the kit, and there's 13 actually. Sorry, there's 13 of the long ones and 3 of the short ones. So if everything is okay, you should have 1 each of them over. Okay, so I'm tightening the rivets, and these 4.8 steel rivets, they are really tough. Really tough to clamp, and they have a really strong clamping force. So not sure if that shows, but you see how much excess epoxy is
Shadowing myself, but we can.
Yeah.
I think you see it now.
Yep. Here's another detail. These are sort of multi-clamping long rivets. In this position, you cannot put them all the way in because it hits the wall behind on the shelf thing. So as you install these, press inwards as they are compressing. You press them in, and that's the way you get them to fit there. Okay, so I popped all the rivets, clamped all the rivets, and just wanted to point out, as I said in the other video, keep pushing these as you clamp them. Over here as well, you need to push this piece down and not just completely rely on the rivet to clamp. And then finally, as there's some excess epoxy here, my tip is to sort of use this and fill whatever small gap, or just even it out to make it look better.